Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of the TIE Pilot Podcast. This is Colonel Zekk Terrik of Sin Squadron with Lieutenant Commander Wynand, also of Sin Squadron, and Lieutenant Commander CharlieX of Beta Squadron. We are here to discuss today Charlie's very unique and mildly insane flight rig. So, Charlie, why don't you tell us first a little bit about yourself and how, specifically how you found the EH, and then how you got into design.
Sure, no problem. I haven't been in the EH that long, since I want to say last October, and space combat flight sims has been a passion of mine for as long as I can remember, since I was a kid growing up, and since you actually needed boot disk to play some of the specific games, just to have the computer actually have the correct memory allocation in order to play them. So from an actual flight rig standpoint, it's just something I always wanted to dabble in. I like to tinker by nature. One of the things we said just before we started the podcast here is, this is definitely not something you can go to a store and just pick up off a shelf. There may be many guides on how people do it, but depending on how you want to use it and what you want to do with it, it's just a ongoing science experiment where it allows you to continue to tinker. So while building this, which originally was for Star Citizen, which seems like 1,000 years ago, that whole Kickstarter campaign kicked off, and
I'm hoping they release it this millennium, man. That'd be nice.
Maybe in 1,000 years we'll get the game, but that was originally the reason why. I'm a big fan of Chris Roberts. One of the first space combat sims I played was his Wing Commander series.
I was just going to say that.
Oh yeah, then on through Privateer, and etc. So when I saw his name on it, I joined the Kickstarter. Like I said, feels like 1,000 years ago. But I knew, just based off the experience and the universes that he likes to build, that looked like a great opportunity to, kind of build something a little more immersive for that experience. And that's when I started to kind of look around. And from the EH standpoint, the joke being, because Star Citizen has not come out in so long, I was just interested in playing other kind of space combat sims, and so I started looking more into TIE Fighter and just looking to see from a mod standpoint or whatever what had been, or what else was going on. And then that's when I stumbled across this, this community, which also seems like it's almost been around for 1,000 years. And, when I had seen that, I was amazed by the fact that there was still such a deeply engaged community in this specifically. So that's when I had enlisted, so to speak, and that's what brings me here today.
Right on, brother. Well, we appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on tonight.
Oh, no problem.
Did you ever? So I'm assuming back in the day you just played TIE Fighter, with a crappy half-broken joystick stuck to your desk. How did you go from there to this?
So we had, so back in the day, I probably had started with a CH Flight Stick Pro. That's probably what I started. Well, everyone started with a keyboard and mouse, right? Where you had and that's when we had trackball mouses as well, right?
I actually played TIE-DOS all the way through with just a mouse on a laptop.
There you go. So you probably burned through a couple of mouse pads just trying.
Yeah, my wrist hurt.
So, that's originally how we started playing. Then, CH Flight Stick Pro was what I had then moved on to, which I loved. And then everybody, I feel, went then to Thrustmaster, and I had the Thrustmaster Top Gun series, which I still have because I was playing. I do have a Pentium 2 400 megahertz PC, which I do have DOS 622 on and Windows 98 Second Edition on, because I do have the original DOS versions of not only TIE Fighter, X-Wing, but also Wing Commander, etc. And I do have that Thrustmaster still connected to the game port. It creaks like an old door with rusty hinges, but she'll still get you home.
And it reminds me of high school when you start talking about all that Windows 98 and stuff like that.
Yeah, high school was, I mean, it was late middle school, early high school. I mean, I always tell people, I'm in the technology field now, and it was because just tinkering with computers, because back then when you wanted a game on a computer, as the new games came out, I talked about boot disks already, but I mean, you had to be brave. I mean, this was back when even when you wanted to, connect online through dial-up to each other, you had to install a modem inside the PC, and you had to flip your own, set your own IRQs, COM ports, and et cetera. So you had to naturally be at least a little curious in order to, experience the best of what was available at the time. And that led to, even in high school, we used to ransack our CAD, our computer-aided drafting room for hubs, network hubs, spare Novell network, IPX network cards, and even at home, when we started getting interested in our own LAN gaming, we would, we'd use that equipment to set up a simple network there, and that was to play Duke Nukem 3D at the time, and some Doom 2 over an IPX network. So,
did you ever try to play Net Doom? Did you ever play Net Doom?
I have not. I did just Google and see that there is an online. Jeez, I'm the word right now, but there's an online way to play the original Doom and Doom 2.
Yeah, that one was a mess, man. If you got it to work, you were very, very lucky.
Speaking of LAN parties, have you ever seen that picture where they duct taped a guy to the ceiling?
Yes, I was reading about that the other day. I guess they had no room for him, so he thought he was going to have to leave, and they ended up just they were just like duct taping him to the ceiling. I know if you Google it, there's a whole story written up about it.
Oh yeah,
I used to host those. And
I did too, man.
Those were a lot of fun. That was back then. A lot of that was Counter-Strike, Global, a lot of first-person shooters. Then Rise of Nations was a pretty cool Microsoft.
That is a good game. That is, I think, more than any other RTS, Rise of Nations deserves a sequel. As much as I love Age of Empires, we already have 4 Age of Empires games if you count mythology.
It technically has a sequel, Rise of Legends, on it. It was more fantasy-based, I think, but it did have a sequel.
Okay, but that's sort of like a spin-off, because it's not, it's different gameplay, but it's not sort of.
No, it was. You know what I mean? Play that on the holidays when I have, the cousins come over. I have 2 brothers, so I have to. I literally have like an army, and that's one of the neat things about being such a fan of legacy games, classic games, is you can have half a dozen old laptops that can't run another damn thing, but they can rock, they can rock Rise of Nations, they can rock Counter-Strike 1.2, 1.6, they can usually play these games that are still a blast that you could throw together to put together a LAN party on a budget.
So, Charlie, I'm looking at the picture of your setup that you sent me, and for those of it, this is an audio recording, so I will post a picture of it in the news feed. But I'm just curious, how much from start to finish did this cost you? Because it looks like you took apart an F-16 and just sort of put it in your living room almost.
So anybody who has any particular hobby knows that there is very easily a rabbit hole that you can burrow yourself very deeply into.
Yeah, I did that with Magic the Gathering, unfortunately.
And this one definitely was one for me. My one advice would be is, if it is just there is no single game. Well, I guess maybe some people will debate that, but typically there's not a single game which would justify the purchase. I use this setup not only for space combat, but for flying, for driving as well. I have a steering wheel I could drop in, and I mentioned just on the Discord feed earlier that hoping to get MechWarrior 5 probably sometime towards the end of this year. But
that's going to be fun.
Yeah, so I use it for a lot, but I mean it is not cheap. It is so the nice thing about this is that it's modular in nature. This is definitely not you need all of it or none of it kind of thing. But I mean definitely some of the bigger components are. I actually do have like a 2 Degree of Freedom motion platform. I'll have to post a video of it. And you may hear it kind of going back and forth right now, but basically based off joystick, rudder, or throttle movements, it actually moves the chair as well. For older games, like this, I have to create a specific profile. So it just takes the DirectX input hooks and it just simulates the movement based off that. But for newer games, especially driving games, etc., they actually have APIs or they have interfaces here where it'll be more realistic movement to the actual motion in the game itself. But I mean, a platform like that, brand new, is like $3,000, you know, just for that.
That's actually, I thought it would be much more expensive than that. That's actually not too bad.
For a moving seat, yeah, I was expecting you to say like $10,000 or something.
I was thinking 5 figures at least.
Well, this was just for the motion platform itself. And the reason why I picked this one is because you're absolutely right. Every other platform I looked at was $9,000 to $10,000. And I did not, even me, I did not want to put in $9,000 to $10,000 for that. And this one was small enough. Like I said, it's only like the 2 degrees of freedom. A lot of those $9,000 or $10,000 ones are like 6 degrees of freedom. And that's basically the amount of movement that it could simulate, the different types of movement.
Yeah.
You know, side to side, up, down, rotating, left, right, etc. So I scaled back a little, just because otherwise I never would have, you know, gotten any of those other ones. So that's neat. Like I said, for the newer games, it's great. For older ones like this, which is still it's still a neat experience. Like I said, you do a little more, not necessarily scripting, but a little more provisioning so that it. So, for instance, when I push the throttle forward to go, you know, to set speed to 100%, I can set up a script or provision it so that the chair moves back to simulate, you know, increase the speed, moving the rudder pedals, etc. Like I said, I'll share a video showing that. Another thing to help with it's kind of like haptic feedback, but there's something that attaches to the chair called a bass kicker, which, if you think your phone, when you set it to vibrate, it's basically like that, like a giant vibrator for the chair, that when it gets low frequency noise from the sound card, it just shakes. And it's fantastic in terms of, from an immersion standpoint. That's typically, those are only like $150 on Amazon.
That sounds really cool.
So, and that's any low frequency. So even if you're listening to music in the background, you know, it has its own amplifier. So you basically, if you have like a 5.1 sound card out of the computer, you'll typically have a line for your sub. So you either split off that line to put it in this amplifier, which then connects to that bass kicker. In more expensive sim rigs, for driving in particular, sometimes people have 4 of them. They put one in each corner to, like I said, actually simulate, because some of the more advanced, and I can't remember if it's like a set of Corsica or if I'm even saying that right, or like iRacing, some of them actually support multiple like bass kickers to simulate, like I said, different wheels actually feeling different noise.
Boy, the Rebel pilots aren't going to know what hit them, man.
Yeah, but this is pretty slick. So like I said, explosions. You may be able to hear it. I've got a Star Destroyer here in front of me. If I drift a little too close to the engine wash, the whole damn thing starts shaking and rumbling, and it's just incredible. Obviously, if you're flying by somewhere something explodes, you could do that as well. I did another trick as well. So I use, probably like a lot of people, because I have a throttle, I have the stick, I've got the rudder pedals. For these old games, I use Joystick Gremlin to kind of create a single virtual joystick so that the game only sees one controller. But what's cool about Joystick Gremlin is that you can actually attach sounds and other things to the keys. So the lasers sound great, as they typically do in this X-Wing Alliance mod, this Darksaber mod for it. But I liked in the original TIE Fighter, you know, you can have your lasers double charged, right? You have the first line of
like turbocharged, I think they call it, or something.
Yes. Well, what you may not have noticed if you didn't either have a subwoofer attached or one of these bass kickers attached, but when they're turbocharged, when you fire, there's actually more bass to them to when they're not. And you can tell during the game they sound different when they're.
Mm-hmm.
But that extra sense of bass, you know, I was so used to that in this X-Wing Alliance game, that's not there at all. So I found a single, an actual wave file of just a gentle, like I said, like thumping. And through Joystick Gremlin, I binded it to the trigger, so every time I pull the trigger, I get that as well. So, like I said, I was just a little extra piece just to enjoy it.
Did you do all the hardwaring stuff? Because like I'm looking at your monitor, and it looks like, you know, you have your surround sound mounted on some sort of, can't quite make it out, but like a metal pole or something with holes drilled into it.
So this, there is a guy out of New Zealand, and I think it's just called SimPit. He creates either he has two versions, the Icarus and the Avenger, I want to say, and they're either 180 degree or 270 degree kind of wraparound screens. This is a 180 degree screen, and so if you look up, and I believe it's called the Icarus, and so that's where the actual screen is from, and it's this, it's this wood, this painted black wooden frame that has this black screen. So it's not a white screen, it's actually being projected onto. And the neat difference there, because for a lot of space games, it actually, the blacks are sharper then, right? Because now you're not trying to project black onto a white screen, it's just being projected onto an actual black screen. So it actually looks a lot better from that standpoint. But it's a complete, it's a 180 degree curved screen. And in his original kit, it continued around to make a full circle along the top because the projectors would actually just mount to that. But because of space and the way I want to line it out, I didn't like that. So I don't know if I've ever taken a picture a foot or two further back where you see the projectors are mounted, but I can provide one of those. I just have mine in the drop ceiling, shining on the screen.
Okay, I feel like a 270 would hurt my neck, man. Trying to sit.
Well, that's how as you can imagine, all those 270, it'll be some of your peripherals, but a majority is, the third or 2/3 of the screen that's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a 5.1 speaker setup that you saw, and I just have them mounted across the. I just then bolted those straight in. I went on Amazon or something and found a pair of speaker mountings and mounted those across. The neat thing about the screen, or what's interesting about it, is it is two 1080p projectors that are crossing each other in order to cover the 270 degrees. And there is a third-party application called Warpalizer. I'm sorry, it's called Warpalizer. And what that software does is in real time, you have to then you provision it so that it bends what two crossed over projector screens would look like to make it actually match the curved screen like it does in the photo. So once you provision that and save that setting, it then warps your screen to fit that curve, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get two flat projected images to fit a curved screen is by provisioning it or setting it up to fit in there. So you set that up once, and then when you reset the computer, or whether you're in the Windows desktop or any game, it then matches that curved screen that's on there. If you go and get the 270 degree version, you actually need 3 projectors to cover that. That's yet another reason why I went for the 270, or I'm sorry, the 180 instead of the 270. It's just to keep it to 2 projectors instead of a 3 projector setup.
So do you have any advice for people to get started on wanting to do something like this? Because I'm about to drop my whole life savings into it right now and just looking at it.
So the key thing, PC gaming, one of the things that makes it unique from console gaming is, the good news is there's a lot of choices. The bad news is there's a lot of choices, right? So you have to, it's almost like you first need to start with the types of games you want to play, and then to make sure they support it, because you need to get into understanding, okay, the games I'm getting, do they support multi-monitors? Do they support 2 screens? Do they support spanning? Controls are different across. I think I made a couple posts on, I just finished earlier today actually binding all the keys, because although you have a keyboard and mouse, ideally you don't want to have to touch it, especially while in flight. So binding all the keys and getting used to that. But the first step is knowing a little bit about the type of games, or specifically the games you want to play. And like I said, the first big question is, if you want to do something where it's more than one screen, does it support multi-monitor? Or if you're interested in, like, for instance, new Squadrons coming out, and that'll be virtual reality, is that your plan? Just to play it with VR? So then you, from a budgeting standpoint, eliminating the projectors, the screen, and all that may be a route that some people take. I'm on the fence on that, only because I know somebody who has a Valve Index. I have the Oculus Rift, the first commercial version, but I don't know if the Valve Index is a big enough upgrade yet, or if I want to wait one more generation for it. But we'll see. So definitely, first question is, what kind of games you want to play, and will they even support something like this? You guys have probably had to deal with like D3D, wrapping and anything else with DLLs that you need to drop in to get
for sure.
some of these older games to work. That's something you need to just have an understanding of. The other aspect is the controls. Are you building it for one game or multiple? Like I mentioned before, and just try to make it easy for you to manage, because at the end of the day, you do want to have fun with it. So, like I said before, I have a USB switch in here. So if I am switching from flying to driving, it is simple enough that I have a next level racing kind of a wheel and pedal setup, so that I can quickly just drop it in and plug the USB and plug in the power, and then I'm off to driving instead. So you just have to think through that a little bit, because of if you are going to be doing the first-person shooter. Obviously, this should not be a dedicated setup for that. Just like you said, your neck would probably hurt after a while. But part of when looking at Star Citizen, it does have a first-person shooting component of it. So I had to build out this little keyboard and mouse tray. The chair that I originally had a swivel keyboard and mouse tray on there. However, when that's on a motion platform, you don't need that tray swinging all around while the chair is moving. So as you can see in the photo, I kind of pieced together with some steel piping something to mount an actual keyboard and mouse to, where I can quickly move it in and out of position if I need to quickly go from flying or driving to running and gunning, so to speak.
Right on, man. Well, we're about almost a little over 20 minutes deep, which is usually our typical run time. Jack, you have anything to add?
Not really. I think Charlie... Oh, actually, yeah. So if you could pick one brand of joystick and one brand of mount, like a joystick mount, what would they be?
So I just grabbed this new pair of Virpil controls. So I have the Virpil Constellation Alphas, and I did grab a right and left, once again for Star Citizen, but I did also grab their CM2 throttle. But right now I'm using a Constellation Alpha on just the standard Warbird mount, and then I have the CM2 throttle here, both from Virpil. The rudder pedals I went with, I have a Crosswind rudder pedals. I like them because they were just, from reviews that I had read, they seem more comfortable to use for long haul. So that's what I retired my CH products. That's what I had for several years beforehand. And one of the main drivers was because I wanted a right and left setup, because I was very interested in trying a dual joystick setup for Star Citizen.
Charlie, just curious, are you left or right-handed? I'm looking at your setup right now.
I'm right-handed.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I think, we got everything. So, Charlie, I appreciate you joining us, man. This was freakishly fascinating.